Hello, I'm Michael, and this is Tarot by the Tree. This is our ongoing series now of studies into the minor arcana. We're doing it suit by suit from Ace to King. We're presently on the swords. This is the fourth suit we're discussing. Yesterday, we looked at the Two of Swords. Swords, as we know, is power, and this person is having to make a decision. They know that they are going to have to choose something that will affect someone else. They also know they can't possibly have all the facts necessary to make a just decision. They'll do the best they can, but they are operating somewhat blindly. Today's card is the Three of Swords. And it's one of the more obvious cards in the deck. As a recap, all swords are double-edged. They inflict harm on the wielder as well as the target. When we talk about power, we can talk about external power, how you affect the outside world. And people can also say, well, what about personal power? And that's a real thing. We talk about the power of imagination, the power of intellect. When we talk about external power, we start getting into one of the things about power, which is the temptation, the almost the feeling of joy that it can give you and make you want to use it or wield it. When you have power, the tendency is to always want to use it externally. For instance, you might want to control people for their own good. A beneficent kind of dictatorship here, where you would have the power to be able to nicely force people into a better life. The acquisition of power can make people unconsciously seek an enemy. You've got all this power welling up inside you, and it's almost like we wait for someone to do something, to step out of line, so we can remind them that we are powerful. There is a tendency to want to defend others. When you have some power, you may find you're being an advocate more often. And finally, power has a really tricky thing to it, and that's vengeance. And revenge, like power, can feel good. Vengeance disguised as teaching a lesson, or more often, justice. These are some of the caveats of using power externally. Power is intoxicating. We'll look at the Three of Cards now. I'll describe the card. The upper sky is filled with storm clouds. Rain dashes down. A red heart symbol fills the middle of the card. Three swords have stabbed the heart. The meaning of this card is a little bit self-evident. It's heartbreak. Specifically, if we want to break that down a little bit, it is the loss of an affection you might once have taken for granted. It's sadness, it's regret, and mingled in with all of that is your justification. You have to have your mind convince yourself that you had to do it. It was unfortunate that things went wrong, but you had to do what you had to do. And to some extent, there's truth to that. In a position of power, anarchy can't rule. The person with power may have to take some control. In a reading, I would say something like this. If a person turned this card up and it was applying to their life, I would say, look into your life. There was in your life a place or person who gave you affection and joy. Also in your life, you have acquired a degree of power. This card means your use of that power has resulted in heartbreak or sadness. The love you used to have is gone. This may apply to friendships. And when you're young, the kids, there are a bunch of kids who aren't very nice to you or ignore you. And then there's a group of playmates that you hang out with others. As we grow older, the for many of us, the surrounding of our lives with various friendships can decrease. And there are many reasons for that. Things change. And what we realize with swords is the fragility of human affection. These are actually very tenuous things that we take for granted. And it's not until, excuse me, you become a burden on these people or you exert power on these people that you find out how fragile some of these things may be. Power is often seen in its external application. It may not be noticeable if it's not applied. Internal power is really a kind of strength. We perceive power in the winner of a contest. And again, a loser who doesn't give up is strong, but you may not consider them powerful, at least not in that situation. There are 4 suits in tarot, and each one is an attribute that we have to develop. The idea of choosing not to partake in one of the suits would be a very different thing and not within the human nature of most people. In the instance of swords, being powerless is not something most of us would usually want or seek. When we consider cups, being joyless is not likely an end goal. In staffs, you wouldn't want to be deprived of your ideas and plans. And in coins, with no personal wealth at all, you're like a leaf in a storm. With staffs, your plans, you can have ideas that you can make happen. And with swords, power allows you to choose or refuse. And I think that's a big thing with the acquisition of power, is you get a kind of autonomy. You can choose or refuse, and that those 2 options may not have been available to you before you had a degree of power. Think of power as a puppet removing the strings. As a child, we had strings on all kinds of people and places pull those strings. Power allows you to remove those strings and choose your own mode of walking and location of choice. Power allows you to keep what you have. Without power, you'd constantly lose your belongings through one means or another. Power is a natural ability to defend yourself or someone else. That defense does not have to be a violent thing, but it should be an effective thing, and power will allow you to find that. Power is also a source of admiration and respect, and of course, we all feed off that. We are actually hardwired for acquiring the 4 suits: the happiness of cups, the ideas of staffs, the relative wealth of coins, and the independence and security of swords. The card of today, in a sense, follows the card of yesterday. We know that she had a very difficult choice to make. She did not have all the facts. She had to make a choice. And perhaps it wasn't the most just choice, or there were repercussions that he didn't understand at the time. And that brings us to today's card. It is sadness as a result of your use of power. Why don't we turn to the questions?
What do the clouds mean?
Okay. I think the cloud means, and they're at the top, that this person has no access to their higher selves at this moment. They feel sorrow, they feel guilt, they feel regret. The higher sense is blocked at this time.
What exactly is that big red heart symbol?
The big red heart means love. In this case, it may be a love that you had taken for granted, an affection that you had taken for granted. The acquisition of power will force upon you a responsibility because you don't want to bear the loss of the poor use of power.
Why was the heart stabbed in the first place?
The heart was stabbed because somebody with power had a bit of authority thrust onto them. There was a situation that had to be resolved, and no one was better to do it than that person. And they did it. As a result of that, a bond of affection was severed. The person who wielded the swords would probably justify it, and might be just in doing that they had to do what had to be done. And I think with the suit of swords, there's a bit of good news to this, is that this is early in the suit, and the person is just learning the effects of power and what they can do.
If power causes sadness and the use of power also hurts, why don't we just reject power altogether?
That would be, it makes sense. But power is like salt on your food, the same as happiness is. It improves everything. Without power, you are a puppet. You're not living a full life. The 4 suits of tarot are the must-haves for a developed human being.
Is there any good news about this card?
The good news is you're learning. And you're not learning just bad things. You're learning that sometimes something needs to be done, no matter how the chips fall. That's the big learning. That's the big good news of having power, that not everything is dependent on other people's feelings.
Does this card depict cruelty?
Oh, I guess we'd have to define cruelty. I was thinking you have to break eggs to make an omelet, and it sounds trite, but there were bigger things at stake in this card than hurt feelings. This person has to consider outcomes, and perhaps they went at it in kind of a ramshackle way, a little heavy-handed, but it was the outcome they were after. There is an aspect of cruelty to power.
Is this a card of regret?
Yes, it might be. Despite the justification that it had to be done, I think at times of rest, there might be a feeling, could I have done this differently? But that could be a never-ending guessing game. Perhaps another lesson is you just can't please all the people all the time.
I guess this card could be seen in 2 different ways. One from someone being stabbed in the heart, or from somebody feeling they have to end this relationship, but it will hurt them too.
I hadn't actually thought of that, but that would be, that's a really interesting idea, that this was not an accidental bit of heartbreak. This was intentional. Somebody said, look, this is not healthy for me. Rather than just sort of pussyfoot around it, I'm going to end it with a slash and a stab or 2.
Is this card of 3 of swords a result of the 2 of swords?
I think the designers of the tarot may have made it like that. And we'll see next day with the 4 an aspect of this too. This is people young in the way of power. I don't know if you remember the first time it occurred to you that you weren't a doormat anymore. This person found that thrust upon them was authority and choice. They made that choice, and they're not used to power. They're not used to having a permanent effect on other people. And that's what happened. And for now, they feel saddened by it. In time, I don't think they get callous. I think they just get used to the idea that there are bigger issues than catering to everybody's feelings.
And ultimately, any card is never a standalone. It always comes accompanied by other cards, which
Yeah. Now, you were mentioning this the other day, and we'll have to do that. We'll have to take some cards, and we are going to be doing, after this series, fortune telling, but we'll start doing some of the card combinations and see how they change.
the meaning, well, how they influence the meaning
Yes.
of this one in particular. That are you the perpetrator or the victim, if you will?
Yeah, and sometimes I will put, this is the main card, and I'll put a second one on the side, and that's an indicator, like you were saying. So one card, how does it influence the other?
Final thoughts.
Oh, final thoughts. Yeah, we can't live our lives 100% in the shadow of other people's feelings. There are things that are important that need to be done, and sometimes we're the people that have to take charge and get that thing done. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you again next day with the Four of Swords.